This is Samurai Shodown running on Nintendo Switch. Nowadays, Neo Geo emulation is so ubiquitous that this is a pretty normal sight. But back in the day, the Neo Geo arcade machine was so cutting edge that getting the Neo Geo experience at home was a luxury few could afford. With the Neo Geo AES or Neo Geo CD systems out of most people's reach, SNK needed to do more to get their games in as many hands as possible, so they licensed out their biggest arcade hits for various console ports. Even through the PlayStation and Saturn era, things weren't quite perfect. It wouldn't be until the PS2 that we would see Neo Geo titles in uncompromised arcade perfection accessible to most gamers at home. Even still, the early home console ports were quite respectable. But what about the Game Boy? You might be surprised. Enter Takara. Takara published Sega Mega Drive and Super NES ports of various Neo Geo titles, and they're all surprisingly good. Each port is tailored to the hardware in really interesting ways. Some were developed internally by Takara, others were contracted to other developers, but they're all pretty good. This approach also comes through in the Game Boy ports, which in Japan were released in a series called Nettō, or Dead Heat Fighters. Let's take Samurai Shodown for instance. Characters are redrawn in a chibi art style, with some beautiful full-screen cutscene art. In-game, the characters are clearly visible and smoothly animated, something that was not easy to accomplish on a screen like this, and it runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second to boot. It's even Super Game Boy enhanced with support for 2 players. Capcom had no business making such a jerky version of Street Fighter 2 when Takara was already out here with quality like this, although Capcom would punch back with Street Fighter Alpha later on. Finally I can fit the Neo Geo experience in my pocket. Let's just show how pocket sized this thing is. Oh, right. Since we're already on the subject of Samurai Shodown, let's start with that one first. First up is Samurai Shodown, released in June 1994 in Japan and later that same year internationally. Originally released to arcades in 1993, Samurai Shodown was a big deal at the time and was ported to just about everything, but all the console ports had compromises in some form or another. The Mega Drive and Mega CD versions for instance lack the character Earthquake and are missing a bunch of story elements, and the Super Nintendo version has tiny character sprites but does have the full roster. Even the infamous 3DO port developed by Crystal Dynamics has some serious performance issues. And then we have the Game Boy version, which interestingly was the first console port besides Neo Geo AES to come out in Japan. It manages to squeeze in the full roster of 12 characters including Earthquake. It plays remarkably well too. As I mentioned earlier, it's silky smooth and super responsive. However, character movesets are cut back, with many combos not being present and fatalities missing entirely. But there's so much to love about this port, from its full screen cutscene art to the Super Game Boy support. As a huge fan of the Game Boy, this is definitely my aesthetic and one of my favorite ports in this video. You can tell a lot of love went into this one. That said, it is pretty basic as far as these ports go, so there's not much else to say here. There's also a port of Samurai Shodown 3 that came later on, which I'll talk about soon, but it's quite a different beast from this one. The next of these ports to come out was Fatal Fury 2, released 2 years after the arcade release in July of 1994 exclusively in Japan. Like the other home versions of this game, this one lets you play as the 4 boss characters. And this is cute. Since the Game Boy version lacks voices, they have little speech bubbles when performing special attacks. And wow, check out that border! Yeah, all games starting with this one also have Super Game Boy borders with some great pixel art. As for the game itself, well, I'm really sorry about this. I know Fatal Fury 2 is a classic and all, but I just can't get into this Game Boy version. The gameplay is so stiff, the AI is difficult even on easy mode, and it's just not very fun. It's a pretty basic approximation of Fatal Fury 2, lacking the series' signature multiple planes. Movesets feel familiar, but connecting attacks never feels as reliable as I'd like. I couldn't even play this game if you forced me to. Shame too, because even if the presentation is a little basic, the music is good, and the graphics are actually pretty nice. And it runs well too. It's just a shame it's not very fun. Sorry again to cut this one short, but I think it's time to move on. Let's take a break from SNK for a bit. ADK got some love too with World Heroes 2 Jet. developed by Betup. Good advice. And released worldwide by Takara in 1995. While World Heroes 1 and 2 got 16-bit ports, and the later World Heroes Perfect came out on Sega Saturn, this is actually the only non-Neo Geo home version of World Heroes 2 Jet until the PS2 collection, so it's got some big shoes to fill. And this one's a little disappointing. I mean, it still has the slick presentation and adorable pixel art that the other games do, but it's much more sluggish and runs at 30 FPS. I guess I can't be too critical since this is the Game Boy we're talking about, and it still plays totally fine, but I don't know about this one. Okay, diving into it more, it's starting to grow on me. There's certainly a level of mechanical complexity here. Executing dash attacks and powerful combos feels pretty good, but I just can't get over how sluggish this one feels. It lacks the quick response seen in some of the other games in this lineup. I don't know if I'm just bad at this game, but it feels like the controls don't match up with what's happening on screen. On a positive note, the presentation is pretty great. The sprite work is nice with some adorable character portraits, and there's a ton of Game Boy core to appreciate here. This intro sequence reminds me of... How familiar are you with the Metabots games? Even though I'm not enjoying this one so much, it still feels like a treat to play just based on its presentation alone. I like this one, even if I don't love it. The same studio who adapted World Heroes 2 Jet also developed a version of Samurai Shodown 3, released in 1996 exclusively in Japan. Samurai Shodown 3 was a divisive entry in the series that didn't exactly live up to the standards set by the first two games, but maybe the Game Boy version will be okay. This one actually does play a bit better than World Heroes. It's got the same sluggish performance, which feels like a step down from Samurai Shodown 1, but everything feels pretty good. Whoa, voice acting! Take that, Fatal Fury 2. I appreciate the character artwork too. The presentation of everything surrounding the gameplay is overall quite solid. It also looks pretty special on the Super Game Boy. Look at this! Game Boy normally only has 4 shades, but each tile has been colored individually to give the impression of full color art. I mean, I don't hate it, there's a lot going for it. The gameplay feels quite deep for a Game Boy fighter, but the biggest problem is that the graphics just aren't very clear. The character sprites are fine. The animations are a little difficult to follow, but flicker is a bit of a problem, and there's too much low contrast, high frequency detail in the background. Characters blend into the background and everything is just a bit too dark. It's fine enough in a real Game Boy, or a Game Boy Pocket in my case, but emulation does not flatter this game at all. Playing it on a Game Boy Color with palettes may not be the intended way to play, but it really helps with visibility. Samurai Shodown 1 definitely does not have this issue. There's a much greater contrast between the characters and backgrounds here. These are two very different takes on Samurai Shodown. I know they're pretty different games to begin with, but every single element of the presentation differs so much here. While Samurai Shodown 1 is arguably more basic in its mechanics, it also makes smart changes to better suit the hardware. Samurai Shodown 3 really punches above its weight mechanically, and the character movesets feel much more complete, but it doesn't look quite as attractive and it's so choppy, which combined make it feel a lot harder to tell what's going on. Alongside World Heroes 2 Jet though, I will say that the Super Game Boy implementation in these two games is outstanding. There's a ton of full color artwork that really shows just what the Super Game Boy can do. Consider me impressed. So this is an exciting one. While it came onto the scene too late for the 16-bit systems, even the King of Fighters got in on the Game Boy action with two exceptional, though very similar ports. The King of Fighters 95, as well as the King of Fighters 96, which outside of Japan was renamed the King of Fighters Heat of Battle. Both games were developed by Guybrush, who also made the Mega Drive Fatal Fury games. As usual, they were published in Japan by Takara, but were distributed by Laguna in Europe, while Nintendo published 95 in North America, skipping 96. This is the point where the cutbacks start becoming more apparent. While both single play and 3-on-3 team play modes are there and accounted for, the rosters in both games are significantly cut down, though there are some bonus characters not featured in the other versions. That isn't to say that the games feel compromised though. You'll find that all the characters that are present still have their familiar movesets. Even with these tiny sprites, you can still tell what's going on easily due to the clear contrast between characters in the background. It also kicks the Super Game Boy support up a notch too. Not only can you play on the big screen with 2 players, but these games feature some punchy Super Game Boy sound effects. Nintendo wasn't left out of the KOF action after all. KOF 95 even has a predefined Game Boy Color palette. Let's start with KOF 95 first, and yeah, it's the king of fighters. It's fast, the animations are clear, and connecting attacks feels weighty. A bunch of key fan favorites are present, and their movesets feel familiar, albeit with some moves missing. The super moves are accounted for though. However, the longer you play, the more you start to notice that certain things don't feel quite polished. Stage and music variety is minimal, so you'll be seeing and hearing the same things over and over. And listen to this. Yeah, whenever hit stun or slow motion occur, the music slows down with the game. The music also hangs if you pause the game. Very strange. Also, while the game controls fine in the most part, movement feels a little clunky. I'm not sure how to describe it. Certain actions like dashing and landing from a jump have a noticeable delay at the end that really starts to get uncomfortable after a while. Still, it's tiny KOF, you gotta love it. Moving on to KOF 96, and right away it's clear that developers had more time to improve things. It looks similar at a glance, but character animations and move effects are much more detailed, and gameplay feels much more fluid too. The weird delay on movement is gone, slowdown is reduced, and music playback issues have been fixed. Character movesets are also much more complete this time around. For instance, I couldn't seem to pull off Athena's teleport before, but now I can. All of these improvements combine to create a much more polished feeling game. It's clear that it benefited from more time in the oven. KOF 95 felt a little compromised in some ways, but KOF 96 feels much more closer to its arcade counterpart. This is genuinely impressive stuff, and a ton of fun. It actually ends up being a lot easier and more enjoyable to play since I'm not fighting against the controls as much. I even managed the perfect run of the arcade mode. Gosh, this is such a good game. This is why I was so eager to make this video. Is this not the coolest thing ever? I love it! Easily one of the best games I covered for this video. Rounding out the Neo Geo bunch and the final game in the Dead Heat Fighters lineup is Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, released about a year after the arcade version in 1998. Like other non-Neo Geo home ports of this game, this one was only released in Japan. The Real Bout series was definitely classic SNK at the top of their game, and you may be surprised to hear that this also holds true for the Game Boy version. While there's significant cuts to the roster, this is easily the most impressive one of the bunch. Gameplay is lightning fast, every move has a ton of weight behind it, controls are ultra responsive, the character animation is incredible, and there's even a 3D line scrolling effect on the floor. I didn't even think a fighting game this fast and fluid would even be possible on the Game Boy. Seriously, I can't get over this. The speed and responsiveness in this game makes you feel like you're on a roller coaster. Battles go so fast that a lot of the footage I've recorded is like blink and you'll miss it. I hope you all won't get dizzy from watching me play. Hold on, haven't I seen this stage before? So another major cut in this game is that the stage variety is limited to only a small selection. But with this many animation frames and detail on the characters, I suppose cuts had to be made somewhere. That was a little too easy. Okay, this is unfortunate. No matter how far I get into the arcade mode, I'm still winning battles by spamming the same move over and over. I think I just completely undermined this entire game by finding out you can win battles this way. Seriously, the AI has no idea what to do. Pfft, so much for SNK boss syndrome. I even got up to the secret boss, Geese, and the secret boss, Iori. Yeah, they added Iori from the King of Fighters series as a Game Boy exclusive bonus boss for hardcore players, or mediocre players like me who can cheese their way through the game. Iori definitely puts up a fight, but ooh, gotcha. And that's Real Bout Special. I love it when games tell you how to unlock secrets when you beat them. The KOF games do this too, actually. It's a real shame I was able to cheese through Real Bout Special so easily, because it really is the most impressive game of the bunch. While I adore the first Samurai Shodown, and portable KOF is a treat, on a technical level, the real winner here is Real Bout Special. That's all the Neo Geo games, but there's still one more game in the Dead Heat Fighter series, a Game Boy adaptation of Takara's very own Battle Arena Toshinden, released worldwide in 1996. Now I must confess, I've never played Toshinden, at least not before doing the research for this video, but I definitely grew up hearing people talk about it. Originally developed by Tamsoft and released worldwide in 1995, it was one of those early PlayStation titles that really defined the system. But you may notice that this is a 3D fighting game, so how can something like this possibly translate onto the Game Boy? Why, the Dead Heat Fighters way, of course. Characters once again adopted chibi art style, with cutscenes presented in a similar way to Samurai Shodown 3. It's got the high quality we've come to expect from Takara's other Game Boy fighters. The translation of Toshinden's mechanics into 2D can feel a little weird at first, but it starts making sense quickly enough. I didn't really understand how to play this game at first, but after going back and playing the PS1 games based on, I get it now. I was trying to play it more methodically, like say Samurai Shodown or Soul Calibur, but it's actually a lot like Street Fighter 2. Armed with this knowledge, Toshinden on the Game Boy starts feeling a lot more familiar, and dare I say, I think I even like it more than the PlayStation original. Nothing is really lost by going from 3D to 2D, but the game somehow feels more smooth and refined than the PlayStation version, though bear in mind that I haven't played it on real hardware, and many PS1 emulators have issues running this game at the correct speed. Character movesets are basically identical with the same inputs, grapples are there, you press back to block, and double tap down to sidestep dodge. Even ring outs are here with a 3-strike system, where you can only fall off the arena if you touch the edge 3 times, but be careful because you can still fall out of the ring yourself if you're not careful. Once again, upon beating the game you're given several button combinations you can try out, not just for secret characters, but secret modes too. There's Scorcher mode, which adds more special moves for each character, and there's the Super Game Boy exclusive Jet mode, which makes the game faster, similar to Turbo mode in some Capcom fighters. And yeah, the Super Game Boy support is all there, borders, colors, 2-player support, all that good stuff. Cutscene art looks great in color, and I can see this genuinely being a fun multiplayer game. Toshinden also has a predefined Game Boy color palette that can even take advantage of multiple sprite colors. Overall, Battle Arena Toshinden on the Game Boy is a surprising little gem. An interesting adaptation of a breakthrough 3D fighting game, and a solid fighting game in its own right. Battle Arena Toshinden would see many sequels throughout the PlayStation's life, but aside from emulated re-releases, this remains the only truly portable Toshinden game. While not entirely within the scope of this video, I just can't go without at least mentioning Kettō Beast Wars, released in 1999 for the Game Boy Color exclusively in Japan. While not part of the Nettō Dead Heat Fighters series, Kettō meaning Dual Fighters instead, it's a wholly original Transformers fighting game developed by Takara and running on the same engine as their other Game Boy fighters, and this one is pretty highly regarded among Transformers fans. And let me just say, why on Cybertron did this stay in Japan? As someone who really adored the Beast Wars TV show growing up, I probably would have loved this. We didn't even get the PlayStation or N64 games in PAL regions either, what gives? Even though it's designed for Game Boy Color, it will work on the original Game Boy and Super Game Boy too, with all the usual Super Game Boy enhancements we've come to expect, including sound effects and 2-player support. It's lightning fast and attacks have a ton of weight, very similar to the KOF games in Real Bout Special, so it stands well as a fighting game on its own right and feels great to play. This one comes highly recommended. And that just about covers it. This is a topic I was so excited to cover. The Game Boy is something I'm very passionate about, so there's plenty more I want to talk about, particularly regarding Super Game Boy enhancements, so if you're interested in a follow-up, please let me know. Anyway, that's it for now. If you want to support my channel and other creative endeavors, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps me dedicate more time to producing more videos like this one. Or you can simply like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, or check out some of these other great videos. Still here? So you know how Terry is in Smash now? When he was revealed, a lot of people were like, I've never played Fatal Fury, and I'm just like, dude, of course you haven't. Most people are more likely to know him from the King of Fighters. You have played KOF, right? You haven't? Oh, come on.